Hello, today we're going to be looking at Nassella viridula, green needle grass, one of the target species that we'll be collecting for the Rocky Mountain Native Plant Materials Program. In these training videos, we'll be looking at the dichotomous key annotations from Flora of Colorado by Jennifer Ackerfield, 2nd edition. We'll also be looking at descriptions in the keys to some Colorado grasses in vegetative condition by Harrington and Durrell, recently edited and updated by Jan Wingate. So let's take a look. Nassella is a great one because there's only 2 species in this genus, so it's a bit easier to get there. But let's take a look at what we need to be looking at. So I like to teach people how to key backwards. So find a species that you're looking for and then follow the key backwards. And we'll be able to describe that in other videos where there's more than 2 choices. So here let's just start right at the top. Nassella is a perennial grass and the sheath is open. There's a tuft of hair usually present at the junction of the sheath and the blade, and the ligules are membranous. So let's take a look at that real quickly. Here's that tuft of grass, and you can't really see the membranous sheath in there, but you can see it here in this line drawing. If you pull the grass blade back from the stem, you would see like that what remains is like this kind of clear see-through membrane. And the spikelets are in panicles. So this means that they kind of spread out. There's pedicels to each inflorescence. And the glooms are longer than the floret. So we're going to see that. That means that the fancy stuff, it's longer than the floret itself. And here you can really see that. Although some of the seeds have departed from the stem, but see what remains here, these clear parts, those are the glooms over here. And this part, in any of these darkened sections, that's the lemma and the on and the palea inside. So if you can take a look and appreciate, these dark parts are kind of shorter than these long membranes that are the glooms. All right, and the glooms are acute to air state, which just means that they like come to a point at the tips of them. And then it says on or not, which I'm not quite sure about because both of the keys reference ons. And then the lemma is hard, and the on is on the lemma, and the on is twice geniculate, which just means bent. So here's the on. It's this long thing. You can see it over here. These long filaments that extend from the plant. And in the Nassella, they're twice bent and they're kind of rounded, and you can sort of see that going on here in this plant. Then the paleas are half as long as the lemmas. You could measure that. That would be really hard to see though. And there's disarticulation above the glooms. Now let's see what Wingate talks about. So importantly, these plants are perennial and they lack rhizomes. So that's very important because they're bunch grasses. I've often seen them growing in, a turf of blue grama and buffalo grass, and then the green needle like sticks up in bunches, like for example in the Garden of the Gods. And the sheaths are open, so you can see here and in this line diagram that there's an expansion past the ligule, and that's what that means. And then there's small cavities visible, and the margin is ciliate. So if you look really close, you can sort of see it on this plant picture here, that ciliate edge on the sheath there. And then let's see, collars are long and pubescent to pilose on the lower side, especially near the margin. And the ligules are membranous and they're collar shaped as noted, because see how this is rolling, this sheath here is rolling. So it opens and there's the ligule. All right. So let's go back here for a second. So let's take a look at 1A or 1B. So the ons in the tenuissima are twice as long as the ons in the viridula, and that would be hard to understand unless you measured them and they were next to each other, or if they were greater than 4 centimeters. You might wonder if they are tenuissima. And then the floras are of overlapping size, so I wouldn't use that as my ultimate decision-making process. But here's a really good one. In the tenuissima, the lemmas are glabrous, which means they're smooth. But the lemma are sparsely hairy throughout in the viridula, and we can see that clearly in this image here. So the viridula, the green needle grass, importantly, the leaves are flat, and also notice they have like these deep grooves, and so you can really see that when you are looking at the blade. The calluses are hairy, so let's talk about what the callus is. So down here, right, this comes to kind of a sharp point, and it's real hairy down there. But you see how this is hairy and this is sparsely hairy, the lemma. And then we could measure the on easily in the field, but not with these photos. And these grasses would be found in the prairie, rocky slopes, and dry woods, 35 to 8,500 feet. And they'd flower from June to August, so following flowering, we're waiting for that seed development. Now, you'll always see that I include references. So if it says taxa, this is a great first page to look at because it gives you all the links to SciNet, USDA Plants Database, GBIF, all sorts of stuff you would also want to look at. Let's just go there real quick. So you land on this page and this more info. It's the best place where more info is aggregated right here on the taxa pages of iNaturalist. And then I'll give you some observations also of my own and also all the research grade observations, which is good to see the general range. Great to look in the SciNet, southwestbiodiversity.org, swbiodiversity.org, where you can see photographed herbaria specimens and also think more about geography. And then plants database is not Colorado or region 2 specific. It's the whole state, whole country, but there's some great plant profiles there and also maps of nativity across the whole North America. So let's go on to here. So we looked at this page, we've got these parts, but what I wanted to spend a little time in this video talking about before we conclude and look at more and more photos is this grass floret paradigm. So a lot of the words that we use to describe this plant are, you wouldn't know which one was which unless you could understand what order they appeared as they moved away from the plant stock. So let's look at that a little bit more closely. So the order is always going to be glooms, lemma, palea, floret. The on might be on the lemma. So let's take a look. There's a couple of different diagrams that show this here. So this is a really good diagram of what you'd probably be looking at in the field, but it would be hard to decide which was coming out first. But whatever is closest to the stalk is the gloom. And then you're going to have that lemma. So when you look at this, you see here that this is like a papery outer part, right? But it actually doesn't contain any volume whatsoever. And then here we have the lemma, and that's really different. And then inside of the lemma, the components of the seed are protected. So we can also look up here, you know, this is like a single floret in its components. And here you can see that ordering where we have, this is a great example of this particular key because the gloom is longer than the floret. And then we have the actual sex somewhere inside of there and the on extending from the lemma. Other vocabulary that I wanted to approach that are in these annotations is that the sheath is always representing to like the leaf that is clasping around the stem that you're looking at. And it can have angles, it can be rolled, it can do all sorts of neat things. So if you don't have the seeds to look at, I think that this part of the plant, the grass culm, is like the best place you can be looking. And the more and more you photograph this, the more you get a sense for, like, you get enough practice to get a gut reaction, right? Like another example here, this little node, sometimes it's black, sometimes it's red, sometimes it has hairs on it. So there's that ligule tucked in there that can take on all sorts of different forms as well. And then you want to understand the like patterns that are on the leaves. They're all going to have parallel venation, but they look kind of different. So other vocabulary that you will be looking at. Oh, look, this picture down here is great. Sorry, I was on the wrong slide. So see how there's a membranous ligule here. Pull this down a little bit. And this is called an auricle, where they kind of cross over. And then that's an example of a hairy ligule, where there'd be like a little mustache back there. And just to note, in a carex or species like sedge, it'd be like there's no hollow pith, but all grasses have hollow piths. And so one of the nice things about Wingate's new guide here is that you get this cross section of the stem and leaf sheaths, so you can really get a sense for what that looks like. And you could look at this at any time, no matter what the phenology of the species. So let's finally take a few look at some of these other words we used. Geniculate, it's bent, it's referring to the ons in this case, and twice bent. And convolute is that something is rolled up longitudinally. And so I wrote as in the ons here, but I think I should have written as in the sheath. And then the calyces are the hard downward extension of the lemma. So like if you take that seed with the long on and you poke it into your thumb, it will hurt you. It will draw blood. It's very sharp. And it's also hairy in the case of Nassella viridula. Now, just some terms that were in reference to tenuissima. It was glabrous, which viridula is not. And also it was tuberculate, which means that it has small round bumps, and viridula doesn't have that either. And then finally, we did mention this word acuminate, which just means that something gradually tapers to a sharp point, and sometimes it looks like a little bit concave along the sides, like almost like it's pinched in. All right, let's go back and take a look at some of these images. So here we have, these are images taken when we were collecting seed last year. So there you can see how hairy the seed or lemma really is, with the long bent ons and their convolute. And then here we have those ons sticking out, and you have no idea how many pictures like this are on a naturalist, which gives you none of the information that the key is requesting of you. It just shows you that this thing has ons. Lots of grasses have ons, but having an on in this case, it's a pretty good indication. These are long compared to most ons, and the only ones I can think of off the top of my head that are longer are needle and thread grass, which is a stipa. Here you can see that convolute too, like see how the stem is wrapping, or the leaf is wrapping around the stem, and there's the node, and this is pretty dried out. And there's that acuminate tip on the on. And here are the seeds themselves. You can see how sharp these tips are, and how hairy the lemma is. And this weird bending of the awns, which you might not actually see the bending of the awns until later in the season when it's starting to dry out. And now in this picture, see this one in the middle here that is not dark in color, like that's just a lemma. Those are just the glooms. There's actually no lemma in there. And that's what it looks like. And I always thought with this species, it was really helpful that the seed was kind of dark in color. And we did approach some that never had any dark color, and I kind of thought they aborted because remember last year it was really wet and then it was like a long period of dry in the late summer. So some of these spikelets like never looked like they had any dark mass inside of them, and that made me think that they had aborted. All right, let's go back here. Now we're going to go here. And so you can ask iNaturalist to just give you research grade observations by clicking the filters. So research grade means that like the community of observers agrees. So at least 2/3 of the people who have responded to ID the observation agree. And I also put Colorado here, but you know, region 2, we could look at a larger zone. But let's just look here. You can also look for specific people, like if you want to look for Jennifer Ackerfield herself, she's on here. And then you'd probably be damn sure that the observation is correct, the identification. So I just wanted to point out in this video, interesting, take a look that these observations that were made late in the season last year, they all have smut on them. So one problem we faced last year was that the grasses developed smut from how wet it was. This one, maybe no smut, but there's something about the overall grayness of it that makes me feel like it's got the smut. But now here it's June. This was before smut season. And this picture is a great one. Nothing is browned yet, or the seeds are not darkened yet because this is new, right? This is not fully harvest ready yet. But you can see those glooms, you can see the awns, you can see how the awns are smoother because it's earlier in the season. Let's take a look. Oh, I looked at that one. It wasn't too exciting. Let's take a look here. So here we're seeing another kind of phenology, like a little later than the picture we just saw. So it's a little darker in color. Everything is still really tight in the panicle. And there's still a lot of green. Now, I hope you can appreciate what I was saying before. Like, everyone is taking these same pictures. It's almost impossible to take a great picture of the form of this plant because it's pretty delicate and you need kind of like big black sheet to block the other green. Now look at these seeds. So those look like they're getting to be ready. That darkened color was really a factor when I was looking at it last year, thinking, are these seeds ready or not? But just so you know, we do a cut test to figure that out. All right. Well, thank you so much for having fun with Nassella viridula. And stay tuned for more presentations.